If you're into traditional blood-soaked horror gore, then you'd more than likely be satisfied with 28 Years Later. The movie doesn't hold back in that department, though the movie is not just a mindless action flick that aims to present shock value just for the thrill of it. There is a deeper meaning to the story behind 28 Years Later. Ultimately, 28 Years Later is an action horror drama exploring themes about humanity in this fallen, futuristic, post apocalyptic Britain. The movie starts off with this young boy named Spike, played by Alfie Williams. Williams does a fantastic job of portraying this young boy. Aaron Taylor Johnson also does a great job as the boy's father. I was typically impressed with Aaron Taylor Johnson, just as I was especially impressed by Taylor Johnson in Nocturnal Animals. If you haven't seen Nocturnal Animals, which is a lesser known movie from 2016, you really should check that out. Ralph Fiennes is also brilliant in his role, as he typically always is. Fiennes brings a huge amount of depth and nuance to his eccentric sage-like character Dr. Calsum, and Fiennes' performance here is one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the sequel. You can tell 28 Years Later is a Danny Boyle movie just by looking at it. The quick, frenetic energy Boyle adds to every shot, which is typically exemplified in all of Boyle's films, is once again here. Veteran director Danny Boyle truly understands the importance of framing and how to tell a story through the lens, combined with editing. It creates the typical kinetic pace that underscores all of Boyle's major projects, such as Trainspotting and the original 28 Days Later, for example. That being said, I myself was never a particularly big fan of Boyle's style. Whilst I can certainly appreciate and commend Boyle for the artistic way he frames and cuts shots, it does leave you as a viewer feeling distant, almost like you were looking through a window looking at the scene, rather than being fully immersed in the scene and the movie. As a result, the characters and the story feel emotionally distant. Now, some of that emotional distance was, of course, intentional in 28 Years Later. The boy does feel disconnected from his father, mother, and the post apocalyptic world as a whole, which has fallen to pieces. So, to an extent, the emotional distance that is created via Boyle's camera work reflects the type of emotion you as a viewer are supposed to feel about this fallen apocalyptic world. That feeling is dread. That feeling is emotionless. That feeling is emptiness. That feeling is disconnectedness. The problem is, though, nothing in 28 Years Later feels fun. There ain't any characters to add a sense of comedic relief. Everything seems to be one note. There are tons of zombies trying to kill the main characters. Better toughen up and fight or run for your life is essentially the gist of this movie. Danny Boyle creates a brutal post-apocalyptic world, much like the similarly themed The Last of Us video game. However, unlike The Last of Us, we are not drawn in to know these characters. They seem distant from us, meaning it's hard to care about them because we don't know who they are or what their story is. The good news is, though, this is a slow burner in regards to character development. Eventually, you do start to see what these characters are as the film draws to its conclusion. For that reason, I wouldn't describe 28 Years Later as a great movie on its own, but rather, 28 Years Later is certainly great at introducing us to characters and a world that could become a great movie in the follow up sequels. There is at least one big story point towards the end of the movie that hooks you in to want to watch the sequel. Yes, it's been 28 years or almost 28 years since the original 28 Days Later from 2001 and 18 years since 28 Weeks Later. But we only have to wait 6 months after 28 Years Later, which was initially released in summer 2025, for the next sequel. Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't particularly care either way. Overall, I thought 28 Years Later was pretty mediocre and just barely better than mediocre at most. But what Danny Boyle did here was establish a world and introduce us to characters, if only just barely introduce us to characters. And if the 28 series is only going to go up from here, then I have to say that this movie did do a very stellar and compelling job as an introduction at the very least. I do think things can only get better from 28 Years Later, which is why I'm optimistic for the sequel. even though this movie in particular was neither particularly entertaining or particularly great. 28 Years Later did a good job introducing us to the main characters, and a particularly good job at establishing the themes of this fallen world. And as a result, I feel mostly enthusiastic for the sequel. So, at least in that essential aspect, 28 Years Later was an extremely effective introduction to a previously long dead, now alive film series. No pun intended. Or, I guess in this case, the pun was actually intended. Anyway, if you enjoyed this review, then hit like and subscribe, because I'm going to try to get my 28 Years Later The Bone Temple review out as soon as possible. So hope to see you then. See ya.